The moment I realized my own children were afraid of me had nothing to do with my health. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind meant for family, when my son sat across from me at his kitchen table and avoided my eyes while explaining why right now just isn't a good time for me to stay with them. He kept using the word temporary like a cushion, temporary inconvenience, temporary adjustment, temporary discomfort, but every sentence circled the same truth. I was a burden they didn't want to carry. I am a woman in my early 60s, widowed, independent for most of my life. I had worked, saved, paid my bills on time, raised 2 children who now spoke to me like I was a problem to be managed instead of a mother who needed a place to land. My daughter echoed him later that week. Different tones, same message. She blamed logistics, space, her kids, her schedule. The cost of care, said gently, like she was talking about a leaking roof instead of a human being. Neither of them asked how it felt. Neither of them asked where I would go. They assumed I would figure it out the way I always had. I nodded. I thanked them for their honesty. I told them I understood. That was not a lie. I did understand. What they didn't know was that my fear wasn't about having nowhere to sleep. It was about realizing how quickly love becomes conditional when people start calculating costs. They didn't know about the money. They never knew I had quietly built something substantial over decades. Investments made after my husband passed. A small family business I sold quietly years ago. Careful planning, conservative growth. $18 million. Not spoken aloud, not shared, not flaunted. I had learned long ago that money changes the way people look at you. I preferred invisibility to entitlement. But sitting alone that night in my modest apartment, surrounded by packed boxes because I had assumed one of my children would take me in, I felt something break. Not my heart, my patience. I called the one person who had asked me a different question months earlier. My goddaughter. She was struggling. Single mother, overworked, renting a small place far from ideal. But when I mentioned my situation in passing, she had asked, "Are you okay? Do you need me?" At the time, I said no. This time I didn't. Her answer came without hesitation. "You can stay with us," she said, "as long as you want. No calculations, no conditions, no rehearsed language, just care." I didn't tell her about the money either. Not yet. But as I folded my clothes that night, I felt the story beginning to turn, and I wondered which of my children would regret their decision first. Moving in with my goddaughter felt nothing like moving in with my own children would have. There was no sense of intrusion, no careful rearranging of lives to make room for me. She cleared out a small bedroom, brought in fresh sheets, and hugged me like she meant it. Her house wasn't big, it wasn't perfect. Toys were scattered, bills were stacked neatly but visibly on the counter. Life happened loudly there, and yet I felt welcome in a way I hadn't felt in years. The first morning, I woke early out of habit. I made coffee. I cleaned up quietly, careful not to overstep. She came into the kitchen half asleep and frowned. "You don't have to earn your keep," she said softly. "You're family." That word landed differently coming from her. Family. My own children checked in sporadically. Texts that asked how I was doing but never where I was staying. They assumed I had found some solution that didn't involve them. And I let them believe that. Over the next weeks, I watched my goddaughter struggle without complaint. Long hours, careful budgeting, stress she carried quietly so her child wouldn't feel it. She never once hinted that I was in the way. I began helping where I could, cooking, school pickups, listening. Slowly the house settled into a rhythm. One evening she apologized to me. For the mess, she said, for not having more. I took her hands and looked at her properly. "You have more than you realize," I told her. She smiled politely, not understanding yet. The call from my daughter came late one night. She sounded annoyed. "I heard you're staying with someone else," she said. "I hope you're not making things difficult for them." Difficult. I ended the call shortly after. That was the moment I decided something important. I would stop protecting my children from the consequences of their choices. Not with anger, not with revenge in the loud sense, but with truth. I met with my lawyer the following week. Updated documents, revised beneficiaries, clear instructions. I made one thing certain. The person who showed up when I was inconvenient would be the one who mattered when I was gone. My goddaughter didn't know any of this as she tucked her child into bed that night and thanked me for reading a story. She thought she was saving me. In reality, she was about to inherit a future she never imagined. And my children were about to learn that love measured in inconvenience has a price. A very real one. People don't reveal who they are when everything is easy. They reveal it when caring costs something. Living with my goddaughter made that painfully clear. She never asked me to explain myself. She never asked how long I planned to stay. She never asked what I could contribute financially, even though I could see the strain in her shoulders every evening when she came home from work. Instead, she asked smaller questions. Did I sleep well? Did I like the food? Did I want the window open at night? Those questions carried more dignity than all the polite refusals my own children had wrapped in soft language. My son called one afternoon, his voice clipped efficient. "So you're settled," he said. "Not a question, a conclusion." "Yes," I replied. "That's good," he said. "We were worried you might expect more from us." More. The word sat between us like an accusation. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't remind him of the years I had driven him to practices, stayed up through fevers, helped with down payments, watched his children without counting hours. I simply said goodbye. After that, the calls became less frequent. A birthday text, a holiday check-in, obligation disguised as concern. I watched from a distance as my children continued their lives without disruption. Vacations posted online, new furniture, plans that didn't include me, and for the first time I allowed myself to feel something I had suppressed for years. Anger. Not loud anger, not explosive. The quiet kind that sharpens your thinking. One evening, my goddaughter broke down at the kitchen table, bills spread out, head in her hands. "I don't know how long I can keep doing this," she whispered. "I feel like I'm always one step behind." I sat beside her and listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer false comfort. When she finished, I said carefully, "You don't have to do this alone." She laughed softly. "I don't see another option." Neither did my children when it came to me. That night, after everyone was asleep, I opened the safe deposit box paperwork I had kept hidden in my purse. The documents were updated, clear, final. $18 million. Still a secret. But secrets like patience have limits. I began planning quietly. Not for revenge, for recognition. Recognition of who showed up, recognition of who didn't, and recognition of the truth that blood alone does not define family. By the end of that month, I had made my decision. I would not punish my children. I would simply stop rewarding absence. The first crack appeared around Thanksgiving. My daughter called to ask if I would be joining them. Her tone suggested the invitation was ceremonial, not desired. "We'll be busy," she said, "but you're welcome if you want to come by for dessert." Dessert. I declined. That same evening, my goddaughter asked hesitantly if I wanted to celebrate with her and her child. It wouldn't be fancy, she warned, just simple food and quiet company. I said yes without hesitation. That Thanksgiving, I watched her child set the table, proudly showing me where I would sit. I watched my goddaughter cook while juggling phone calls from work, still making time to ask my opinion on seasoning. No one checked the clock. No one treated my presence like an inconvenience. After dinner, she apologized again. "I wish I could do more," she said. I looked at her across the table. "You already did." That night, as dishes dried on the rack, I realized something deeply unsettling. If I had told my children about the money at the beginning, they would have found room for me immediately. That truth hurt more than their rejection, because it meant their love had conditions. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer. We spoke in hypotheticals, trust structures, guardianship clauses, care provisions, long-term planning. I told her about my goddaughter. "She's not related to you," the lawyer said carefully. "I know," I replied. "That's the point." She nodded. "People often confuse inheritance with obligation," she said. "You're allowed to choose differently." The paperwork moved forward. At home, my goddaughter mentioned she was behind on rent. She said it lightly, like she always did, but I heard the fear underneath. I paid it quietly, anonymously, through a third party. She cried when she found out. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already have," I replied. My son called days later, irritated. "I heard you're helping someone else financially," he said. "You should be careful. People take advantage." I almost laughed. I thought of all the help I had given him without question. All the times I had been available without being asked. "I am careful," I said. "That's why I help." He didn't understand. He wasn't supposed to. As winter approached, the lines were drawn. My children had chosen distance when care felt heavy. My goddaughter had chosen closeness when it cost her something. And soon they would all understand the difference between entitlement and inheritance. But not yet. Not until the truth was unavoidable. Winter has a way of making everything feel heavier. Bills, silences, unspoken truths. As the days grew shorter, my children grew quieter. My son stopped calling altogether. My daughter sent messages that felt automated, like reminders rather than conversations. "Hope you're well. Let me know if you need anything." Anything except space, except time, except inconvenience. Meanwhile, life inside my goddaughter's small home continued at full volume. Her child asked me to read bedtime stories. She asked my opinion on decisions she didn't have to include me in. She trusted me with her exhaustion. One night, after a particularly long shift, she came home shaking with frustration. "I got written up today," she said, dropping her bag. "They said I'm not flexible enough." Flexible. The word made my chest tighten. I had heard it before, usually used to excuse taking more from people who already give too much. "You are doing more than enough," I told her. She shook her head. "It never feels like it." I realized then how familiar that feeling was. That was the night I told her a partial truth. "I've been fortunate," I said carefully. "I'm not as limited as I might seem." She looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "you don't need to worry about me being a burden." She laughed softly. "You were never a burden." The words landed harder than any insult my children had ever delivered. My lawyer called a few days later. The trust draft was ready, detailed, unambiguous. My goddaughter named as primary beneficiary. My children listed with modest provisions enough to avoid legal challenges, not enough to reward abandonment. "Once this is finalized," she said, "there's no misunderstanding." "That's what I want," I replied. Misunderstanding had been my children's shield for too long. As Christmas approached, my daughter invited me over again, this time with a bit more warmth. She had heard through family gossip that I was helping someone else. "You don't have to do that," she said. "We would have helped if we knew." "If they knew about the money?" I declined the invitation again. Christmas morning was quiet, just the three of us. Simple gifts, laughter that didn't require effort. I watched my goddaughter open a small present I had bought her and apologize for not getting me something nicer. "You don't owe me anything," I said. She smiled. "Neither do you." That was the difference. My children believed relationships were transactions waiting to be negotiated. She believed they were commitments you showed up for before being asked. As the year ended, I felt something settle. The guilt I had carried for choosing myself began to loosen, and the resolve hardened. Soon I would stop hiding, not out of spite, out of fairness. The truth came out on a Tuesday. Ordinary, gray, unremarkable. My son called unexpectedly. His voice was strained. "We're thinking about the future," he said. "You know, long-term care, planning. It might make sense for you to move in with us after all." I almost admired the timing. "What changed?" I asked calmly. He hesitated. "We just realized family should stick together." Family, now that rumors had reached him. I told him I would think about it. Then I called my lawyer. "Finalize everything," I said. The following weekend, I sat my children down separately. Not together. I wanted no performance, no alliance. I told them the truth. About the money, about the trust, about my decision. My daughter cried, not quietly, not with shame, with shock. "You didn't trust us," she said. "No," I replied gently. "I watched you." My son grew angry. "You chose someone else over your own blood." "I chose the person who chose me," I said. He accused me of manipulation, of punishment, of revenge. I let him finish. Then I said something I had rehearsed carefully. "This isn't about money. It's about care. You were afraid of me becoming your responsibility." She wasn't. Silence followed. My daughter asked softly, "Is there anything we can do to change this?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. Not because I didn't love them, but because love that arrives only after resources are revealed is not love I trust. When I returned home, my goddaughter was cooking dinner, humming to herself. Her child ran up and hugged my legs without asking permission. I watched them and felt no regret. I told her everything that night. All of it. She cried. She shook her head. She said it was too much, too unfair, too big. "I don't deserve this," she said. "You didn't think you deserved me either," I replied. "And you took me in anyway." She hugged me then tight and wordless. In that moment, the story changed completely. My children had lost something they assumed would always wait for them. And my goddaughter had gained something she never asked for. Not just money, but proof that kindness, even when costly, returns in ways no one can predict. And this was only the beginning of the reckoning. Once the truth is spoken, it doesn't retreat quietly. It settles into rooms, conversations, and relationships, changing how everything sounds afterward. My children didn't react the way movies teach us to expect. There were no dramatic apologies, no sudden realizations delivered with tears and humility. What followed instead was something colder and more revealing: calculation. My son called first 2 days after our conversation. His voice was measured, careful. "We don't want this to create a permanent rift," he said. "Families go through phases. Phases, as if rejection were weather." "I agree," I replied. "This is a phase of clarity." He didn't like that. My daughter sent a long message later that night. Paragraphs explaining stress, fear, responsibility, how overwhelmed she had been when she imagined caring for me. She wrote about love, about intention, about misunderstanding. She never wrote the words I was waiting for. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Silence, I was learning, was not cruelty, it was boundary. At home, life with my goddaughter continued unchanged. That was the part that mattered most to me. She didn't treat me differently after learning the truth. She didn't suddenly defer to me or alter her tone. If anything, she seemed more determined to protect my dignity. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She didn't owe me anything, she said quietly. I just didn't want her to feel unwanted. That sentence echoed in me for days. Unwanted. That was the word my children never said out loud, but had communicated perfectly through avoidance. The trust documents were finalized by the end of the month. Everything was clean, legal, carefully structured to prevent challenges. My lawyer explained the safeguards one last time. Once you're gone, she said, there will be no ambiguity. I nodded. There already isn't. My children tried a new approach when pressure failed. They showed up. My daughter came by unannounced one afternoon, carrying pastries and an apology that sounded rehearsed. She spoke about memories, about how hard it was to imagine me gone, about wanting to rebuild something. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I asked one question. Would you have come if you didn't know about the money? She looked down. That answer was enough. She left quietly. That night, my goddaughter worried aloud that she was the cause of the distance. I don't want to be the reason you lose your children, she said. I took her face gently in my hands. You're not the reason, I said. You're the mirror. She cried then, not from guilt, but from understanding. What my children were facing was not punishment. It was reflection. They were seeing themselves without the comforting story that parents will always wait. And some people don't recognize love until it stops cushioning them from consequences. Acceptance does not arrive with certainty. It arrives in pieces. The first piece came the morning I woke up and didn't check my phone for messages from my children. I made coffee. I helped get a child ready for school. I watched the day begin without bracing for disappointment. That felt new. The second piece came when my goddaughter received an eviction notice by mistake. A clerical error quickly resolved, but enough to send her spiraling. She sat at the table shaking, apologizing to me as if the world had personally embarrassed her in my presence. I pulled her into a chair. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy, I said. You never did. That was the moment she stopped seeing me as a guest. She began calling me Mom, not publicly, not formally, just in quiet moments when she forgot herself. The word felt heavy and light all at once. My children heard about the change through others. My daughter sent a message asking if that made me happy. It did. I didn't reply. I began organizing my affairs beyond money. Letters, instructions, stories I wanted preserved. I wrote to my children too, not to explain my choices, but to explain myself. I wrote honestly about fear, about loneliness, about what it felt like to realize my worth to them depended on my usefulness. I did not accuse. I did not soften. I sealed the letters and instructed my lawyer when to deliver them. Not now. Later. There is a time for truth and a time for consequence. They do not always arrive together. Life in the house grew warmer as spring approached. My goddaughter took on extra work. I helped with childcare. We became a team without ever naming it. One evening, she asked me something that startled me. Do you ever regret having your own kids? She asked gently. I thought for a long time. No, I said. But I regret believing love didn't need to be reciprocal. She nodded. I won't make that mistake. That felt like inheritance, too. My son stopped calling entirely. My daughter tried once more, sending a message that ended with, I hope you'll reconsider someday. I closed the message without answering, because I had reconsidered. For years. And I had finally chosen. The secret money was no longer the center of the story. The truth was, care given without calculation. Love offered without leverage. A home built not on obligation, but on choice. The reckoning my children feared was not financial. It was emotional, and it was irreversible. What comes next would not be loud, but it would be final. The reckoning I had imagined for years did not arrive with shouting or tears. It arrived quietly through absence. My son stopped reaching out entirely. No calls, no messages, not even the polite check-ins he once used to reassure himself that he was still a good son in theory, if not in practice. My daughter tried a different approach. She sent photos of her children, school events, holidays, small attempts to remind me of what I might lose if I stayed firm. I looked at the photos carefully. I loved my grandchildren. That had never been in question. But love does not require surrender. One afternoon, I received a voicemail from my daughter that finally said the word she had avoided for months. I'm sorry, she said. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle the idea of you needing us. The apology was real. I could hear it. But it was late. Not because time had passed, but because the truth had already settled. I called her back. I believe you, I said gently. But believing you doesn't mean undoing what happened. She was quiet for a long moment. "So that's it?" she asked. "No," I said. "This is the beginning of something honest. That doesn't always look like what we expect." She cried. I let her. After the call, I sat in the living room with my goddaughter watching her child draw at the table. Crayons scattered everywhere, music playing softly from a phone speaker. This was not the life my children had imagined for me. It was better. That evening, my goddaughter came home with news that should have frightened her. Her company was downsizing. Her position was uncertain. "I don't want to worry you," she said quickly. "We'll figure it out." I looked at her and felt something solid rise in me. "We will," I said, "together." The next day, I told her something new. Not the full amount, not yet, but enough to change her breathing. "I can help more," I said. "I planned for this." She stared at me, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to know who you were when you thought I had nothing to offer," I replied. She nodded slowly, understanding settling in. That night, I slept deeply. Not because my future was secure, but because my place in someone's life finally was. Spring arrived without ceremony. No announcements, no dramatic turning point. Just light coming earlier in the mornings and the quiet understanding that we had crossed something irreversible. My goddaughter found new work within weeks. Better hours, less pay at first, but stability. She thanked me for believing in her when she hadn't believed in herself. I told her the truth. "I didn't save you," I said. "You showed me who deserved saving." My son reached out once more that spring. Short message, neutral tone. "I hope you're well." I stared at the words longer than necessary, then replied simply, "I am." Nothing more. I had learned that closure does not require conversation. Sometimes it requires acceptance. I finalized the last of my plans that month. Letters updated, instructions clarified, no room for confusion, no room for reinterpretation. My lawyer asked if I was at peace with my decisions. "I am," I said, "because they match reality." On my birthday, my goddaughter surprised me with a small cake and a handmade card from her child. It wasn't elaborate, it wasn't expensive. It was sincere. As we sat together that night, she asked a question that told me how far we had come. "What do you want the rest of your life to look like?" I smiled. "Present," I said. "Not owed, not bargained for, just present." She nodded. "That sounds right. If there is one truth I want anyone listening to this story to understand, it is this. Being unwanted teaches you something painful. Being chosen teaches you something powerful. Money did not create this ending. It only revealed the truth that was already there. My children were afraid of the cost of caring. My goddaughter never calculated it. In the end, the $18 million was not the inheritance that mattered most. The real inheritance was clarity. And clarity once earned is something no one can ever take from you. There is a quiet grief that comes after clarity. Not the sharp kind that knocks the air out of your chest, but the slow realization that some relationships will never return to what you once imagined they were supposed to be. I felt it most strongly one afternoon when I found an old photo album while cleaning out a closet. My children as toddlers, birthday cakes, first days of school, my arms always around them, my smile wide, my posture bent slightly forward like I was ready to catch them if they fell. I sat on the floor and turned the pages carefully. I didn't regret those years, but I finally allowed myself to mourn the future I had assumed was guaranteed just because I had given so much. Love, I was learning, does not accumulate interest. It either flows both ways or it dries up quietly. My daughter came by unexpectedly a few weeks later. No pastries this time, no performance. She looked tired, older. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me, "about watching us." I nodded, inviting her to sit. "I don't think I knew how selfish I was being," she said. "I just kept telling myself it wasn't the right time." "When would it have been?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. We talked for a long time. Not about money, not about the trust, about fear, about responsibility, about how caring for a parent forces you to confront your own limits. "I was scared of losing my life," she admitted. I believed her. "I was scared of losing mine too," I said. That was the moment our relationship shifted from parent and child to two adults facing uncomfortable truth. It didn't repair everything, but it stopped the pretending. My son did not come. That absence hurt differently. It was cleaner, more final. I stopped waiting for him to change. At home, my goddaughter noticed the heaviness and suggested a small trip. Nothing extravagant, just a few days somewhere quiet. We went, we walked, we talked, we rested. One night, sitting on a balcony overlooking nothing special, she said something that settled deep in my chest. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." I looked at her and answered honestly. "You didn't deserve me. You chose me." That choice mattered more than blood history or expectation. As we drove home, I felt something loosen inside me. I was no longer defining myself by who had rejected me. I was defining myself by who had stayed. The story people expect at the end of something like this is dramatic. They expect confrontation. Tears. A final speech where everyone understands what they lost. That is not how life works. Life ends chapters quietly. On an ordinary morning, I sat at the kitchen table, listening to my goddaughter's child talk about school, about a drawing they were proud of, about a future they assumed I would be part of. And I realized I was happy. Not relieved, not vindicated, happy. I finalized the last details of my will shortly after. Everything clear, everything intentional. No surprises left to explain. I included letters for my children, honest ones, loving ones, not apologetic. I told them the truth, that I loved them, that I had always loved them, that love does not mean accepting abandonment quietly. I told them why I chose the person who chose me when I was inconvenient, not profitable, not easy. I sealed the envelopes and handed them to my lawyer. Not to send yet. Someday. That afternoon, my goddaughter asked if I would consider making the arrangement permanent. Legal. Clear. Adoption, even if only on paper. I said yes without hesitation. Not because I needed to replace my children, but because family is not a finite resource. It grows where it is nurtured. If you are listening to this story and you recognize yourself in it, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not selfish for wanting to be cared for. You are not manipulative for noticing who disappears when you need help. You are not wrong for choosing dignity over obligation. Revenge does not always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like redirection. Sometimes it looks like inheritance reimagined. Sometimes it looks like a quiet life where you are wanted. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else may be standing where I once stood, believing they are asking for too much. And if you want to hear more stories about family drama, betrayal, justice, and the unexpected ways karma works, stay with me. Like, subscribe, come back. Come. Because the truth does not disappear when it is ignored. It simply waits for the moment someone is brave enough to choose it.